And here, over 4 centuries ago, Don Pedro Menendez of Spain sighted this shoreland on St. Augustine's Day, 1565. In time, the King of Spain spent $30 million to build Castillo de San Marcos to guard the golden fleets that crossed the Spanish Main. The fort succeeded, at least in protecting its inhabitants, and St. Augustine became the first permanent settlement in the United States, as evidenced by the oldest wooden schoolhouse that still stands. Today, St. Augustine welcomes visitors and vacationists to a recreation of that romantic past. St. George's Street once rang to the cries of English pirates. Sir Francis Drake once burned the town, and General Oglethorpe besieged it. But loving hands have reconstructed it, and like all of Florida, it beguiles the story seeker and the picture maker. Modern Florida, called the Sunshine State, welcomes millions of visitors every year. Perhaps because, as Henry James wrote more than 70 years ago, it has all the secrets of pleasing. Tallahassee, its capital city, lies in the northern part of the state, 500 miles from Miami, and a century removed from that city and the traditions it displays of an antebellum South. Also in the north lies Jacksonville, named for General Andrew Jackson, who fought Englishmen, Spaniards, and Seminoles and became the first U.S. governor of Florida. Jacksonville also differs from the state capital in its bustle and in its sea trade. And then, come back to this, the Suwanee River, which Stephen Foster immortalized in song. The Suwanee flows through northern Florida from Georgia to the Gulf of Mexico. Florida's greatest assets are sun and water, and never forget the water. She has an underground water supply which makes her unique, and which bursts forth in a large number of incredibly beautiful natural springs. They call this one OCALA, just 12 miles south of Tallahassee, a watery cathedral in green mansions of silence. Here you find a natural sanctuary for alligators, ibises, herons, and egrets. Pure water plus 10,000 fish. This is Homosassa Springs, further south near Florida's west coast, another aquatic marvel that makes fish viewing almost unreal. Homosassa also has a gator bowl. Here the slothful reptiles don't merely dream, they respond. And don't pass up the Homosassa hippo, a big, fat, lovable show-off. Florida has a tidal coastline of nearly 8,000 miles, making her second only to Alaska. Part of this glorious ocean front are the white sand beaches around Destin, Fort Walton Beach, Pensacola, and Panama City. Most vacationists say beaches are the biggest attractions of Florida. This one on the shores of St. Petersburg typifies the west coast strands that face the Gulf of Mexico. Florida offers boating, bird watching, and shell collecting on beaches open to bathing all year long. Sanibel Island on the west coast is famous for its variety of shells. Pelicans swoop and dive for food at places like Naples on the lower west coast, where a municipal pier adds to the seaside charm. How different is the Atlantic side of Florida, from Key Biscayne to the north, where surf from the Gulf Stream washes the shore. Ormond Beach, the beach that made Speed famous, has hard-packed sands, as does its sister city, Daytona Beach. Annually, Ormond Beach commemorates the birthplace of auto racing with a parade of antique and classic cars. Early-day automobiles demand a pretty picture. Some of the willing old-timers in their well-cared-for vehicles still engage in ocean-front sprints. A far faster pace takes place at Daytona's International Speedway. Besides the famous stock car races on its high bank turns, Daytona beckons racing enthusiasts for other auto speed tests, too. Like this one, a 250-mile race for sports cars. And you, too, can capture it in all its motion, color, and natural sound. Reedy Point, the Spaniards called this jutting tip of ocean front Cape Canaveral. And from this Reedy Point, men first took off for the moon. The Kennedy Space Center at Canaveral offers NASA bus tours of the Vehicle Assembly Building, the Astronaut Training Facility, the launch sites, and the Air Force Rocket Museum. The Vehicle Assembly Building is the largest such structure in the world, and from its cavernous interior, every assembled rocket moves on an enormous crawler to the launching site. While the flights of astronauts occur less frequently now, you do know this is hallowed ground. Ground from which man has stepped from Earth before taking a next step on the moon. It is a place that has seen the thunder and flame of many a voyage into space. As if moon-going were not enough, Florida offers man-crafted voyages of quite a different kind. Just a few miles west of the Space Center lies Disney World, where you can travel backwards in time to the fantasies of childhood, to showboats on the Mississippi, and to castles on the Rhine. In this same lake country of central Florida stands another awesome creation of man, this time aided by nature and the introduction by Spanish colonists of the orange tree. Visit Claremont, where the citrus tower rises, and see the thousands of groves of sweet oranges stretch out to all horizons. Florida leads the world in citrus production, and the sight and scent of all these dark-leaved trees warrants many, many stops. The French Huguenot Jean Ribaut wrote back to France in 1562, "This is the fairest and fruitfulest place in all the world." And this without even ever seeing the Florida citrus belt. Next to tourism, agriculture is Florida's most extensive industry, and citrus fruit is her most important crop. The very gathering of this colorful harvest makes a story picture by itself. What tremendous beginnings for that final sip of orange juice. Among the hills around Ocala in central Florida, you'll find another crop for which the state has become famous. Here, more than 100 thoroughbred horse farms have made this region one of the 3 largest breeding areas in the nation. The climate, grass, and terrain make ideal conditions for mares, foals, and yearlings. And stallions, too, of course. This is Dr. Fager, one of racing's all-time greats, coming up to strike a pose for the camera. Bright colors and exotic birds suggest stunning pictures throughout the state of Florida, as here in the Parrot jungle in Miami. In fact, you might call this setting very nearly perfect for color photography. The trained macaws and cockatoos will surprise you too. Bird-brained they may be, but knuckleheads they're not. And if you show no fear of little feathered friends, they'll gladly join you for your picture. From parrots to pink flamingos, Florida's birds in a natural Floridian tropical setting. That sign means exactly what it says. You must stay in your car when you drive through Lion Country Safari near West Palm Beach. But staying in your car has other advantages besides the purely negative one of not being eaten. Animal pictures are easy when you, not they, are inside looking out, and when you see them in wide open spaces like this. Of course, the safari covers gentler animals too, such as giraffes who graze on natural goodies right before your eyes. You can stop for photographic supplies in areas protected from the animals, and then proceed if you wish for close shots of wallowing rhinos in the rough. Flowers. Ponce de Leon named Florida because he sighted it soon after Easter on Pascua Florida, the Festival of Flowers. Having got that happy name, Florida never stops demonstrating how very much she deserves it. Flowers grow in Florida during all the seasons of the year. These belong in cypress gardens, a veritable vision of horticultural elegance and color placements. Superman? Nothing of the sort. They're water skiers, for Cypress Gardens has a kind of international corner on this sport. What's more, they do everything in their power to make sure you get the picture.
We will give you a rundown on the light that we recommend. Around water, it is a little bit tricky, so this is why we give light readings for you. Movie cameras, if you're shooting Kodachrome 2, we recommend 16 frames per second on f/16. 24 frames, halfway between 11 and 16. Kodachrome 2 for colored slides, 100 to 125th between 8 and 11, 200 to 250 between 5, 6, and 8. Now over to your left, the girls, 50 feet on your distance. Over to your left. Movies, roll them. Stills, let them stand up. Okay, shoot them. cut movies.
Cypress Gardens, a photographer's paradise. Florida has more ways to fish than you'd imagine. Consider casting on an evening along the shore of the Gulf of Mexico. Then remember that Florida has 30,000 lakes, not to mention numerous springs, rivers, and creeks. Here in St. Petersburg on the west coast, beautiful bridges are ideal spots for the angler, as are docks, piers, and bridges throughout the state. Further reaching for their game are all those sportsmen who sally out from the land. Fishermen who pilot skiffs or other small craft find sport on the inland waterway, on the Florida flats, and the thousands of bays. In the deep blue waters of the Gulf Stream, the avid sport fisherman finds his grandest challenge. Out here, where the spinning of the earth sets the very ocean into motion, surging it around the tip of Florida, ultimately to warm the distant coasts of Europe, the art of catching the offshore game fish becomes an act of outdoor exaltation. Wholly unique to Florida, with nothing else like it in the entire world, is the Everglades, where tram train tours can take you into a national park, now a perpetual sanctuary for plants and wildlife, a haunt of myriad birds and mammals. Another way to view this intriguing expanse is by airboat with an Indian guide. We think of the Everglades as a marsh. You could really call it a river, a tremendous, slow-moving river 70 miles wide, with a calculable flow of water from Lake Okeechobee to the sea. A river that holds the greatest concentration anywhere of sawgrass, one of the oldest green-growing forms known to man. Seminoles. The very word means wild ones. Seminoles retired after the Indian Wars to remote parts of the Everglades, and some of their descendants live here still in villages of thatched palmetto. And all around them, the Everglades, so immense, so unimaginably productive, and yet so fragile in our time. Conservationists have fought to preserve it so that it may serve its true purpose, the beginning of the largest single natural food chain that exists in the cycle of life from plant to fish to man. Southernmost of continental U.S. cities, Key West enjoys the Atlantic on the east, the Strait of Florida on the south, and the Gulf of Mexico on the west. An ocean setting second to none. It is here that people say, the land becomes the sea, and the sea becomes the sky. The sight of shrimp boats clearing Key West's sunny harbor reminds you that its earlier sailors engaged in a kind of piracy. Salvaging wrecks off the Florida reefs became for a while a legal business. Many years later, former President Truman used one of the Navy residences, this one as his winter White House. In this house, Ernest Hemingway wrote many of his books, including To Have and Have Not. If you visit it, you may see descendants of Hemingway's 50 cats who still live in the garden. The naturalist painter John James Audubon lived in this Key West house when he came to sketch Florida birds in 1832. For over 100 miles, joined by the Oversea Highway, that string of islands known as the Florida Keys makes an unforgettable setting in its blue-green sea. Just off the roadsides or on poolside terraces, dining spots al fresco dot the islands, like this one at Duck Key. This inn at ISLAMORADA proves something else about Florida. It has seafood second to none, from conch chowder, pompano, and Florida lobster to what some gourmets consider the finest shellfish of all, the succulent stone crab, served in mouth-watering simplicity. Only 50-odd years ago, the city of Miami had less than 6,000 people. Today, the metropolis of Southeast Florida has become one of America's biggest cities. And across its causeways to the east, you will find a similar miracle of growth, perhaps the most booming pleasure dome on earth, Miami Beach. One encounters here a complex of super hotels that seek individually to create new heights of hostelry. Passing Fort Lauderdale and some of the most beautiful marinas anywhere, the march of luxury accommodations sweeps north up the Florida East Coast. Finally, 70 miles north of Miami, amid masses of palm trees, you come to an island of impeccably groomed estates. This is Palm Beach, the ultimate of winter resorts established by railroad magnate Henry M. Flagler. "I will build upon this very spot," he said in 1890, "a magnificent playground." And that he did. In the 1920s, an itinerant architect, Addison Meisner, set the style of its Spanish-type houses. The Meisner legacy lingers today on Worth Avenue, one of the most exclusive of shopping streets where Moorish arcades give shade and charm to strollers and shoppers. Further up the shore, below St. Augustine, you'll find MARINELAND of Florida, the granddaddy of seaside aquariums and possessor of the smartest porpoises you ever saw. Watch this triple jump. Patriotic to the core, these porpoises play our national pastime, baseball in big league style. The porpoises have mastered basketball, too. Imagine what they could do if they had arms and hands. Most extraordinary of all, they can perform in perfect unison. 3 aces, the marvels of Marineland. Below Miami, on the approach to Key Biscayne, another aquarium complex deserves attention. This one's called the SEAQUARIUM, and it has a pair of superstars, killer whales, gigantic in their bold black and white markings. You almost hold your breath in surprise when you see them as close as this. Three and a half tons projected 30 feet into the air. At sea, in packs, killer whales are the deadliest predators in the ocean. Here, they become as playful as porpoises and show equal intelligence. In slow motion, the water glistens on their slippery sides as they fall with fountain-like thumping splashes. From white water to white sails and Florida's surrounding seas, Audubon often noted the colors of this sea, the velvet tones of Florida's air, and most of all, the spells that Florida's blue-gold sunsets cast upon his spirits. Somewhere beyond the sunset, wrote John Masefield, could I but find the way. Why do so many millions visit Florida? Because no visit ever lasts long enough. No life lasts long enough to capture all the visions in the latitudes and lights of this much blessed state.